Hey everybody, Smiley here, and I am going to show you a little review of what we were doing before we left. So when we were last at school, we talked about solving trig ratios, meaning solving for missing sides or missing angles, and depending on what the problem looked like was going to depend on the way we set up the problem. Okay. So either way, when we were doing these problems, the mnemonic device that we were using to remember our ratios was right? Where this was the sine function ratio, this was the cosine trig ratio, and this was the tangent. The other thing we talked about with these is what each of these letters represented. Remember that the first letter is telling you what function it is. The second letter is telling you what your numerator is. And the last letter is telling you what your denominator is for your ratio, helping you to set up your ratio. And remember, the way we're setting up this ratio is you take your trig function, whatever it may be, let's say sine, of your angle measurement, which should be in degrees, and that's going to equal whatever the length of your opposite side is over the length of your hypotenuse, just for one example, right? So it's different depending on which trig function you're using. And you know what trig function you're going to use based on the problem that's given to you. Okay, so let's look at number one. On number one, we can see that the angle is given to us. What we are trying to find is we are trying to find a side. The side that we are trying to find here is x, right? Right there. There it is. That's the one that we're trying to find. So just realize that. Okay. So then, since I'm dealing with angle measurement of 38, okay, I need to look at the sides that I'm dealing with. I'm definitely dealing with a hypotenuse. This is my hypotenuse, right? This is my hypotenuse. If you want to label that H, you can. The only trig function that doesn't include the hypotenuse is tangent. So we know it's not that. So then we go and look at the other side that we're dealing with, which is this side marked as x. In relation to the angle, that angle x is what we call the adjacent side. Mark it with an A if you want to, it doesn't matter. Okay, so I know that I'm dealing with an adjacent and a hypotenuse, so that means cosine is my winner. So then I'm going to go ahead and set this up using cosine. Abbreviation for cosine, COS, cosine of the angle. So that's 38 degrees. And then from there, we are setting up our ratio as adjacent side length, which is x, that's what we're going to find, over hypotenuse side length, which is 21. Okay, so now we have to solve for x using the rules that we know about solving for equations that we learned way back in Algebra 1. So we're going to go ahead and move the 21 to the other side, and we do that by multiplying both sides by 21. Opposite of division is multiplication. So I do that here and I do that here, right? Remember, this is really 21 over 1, so that allows this to cancel out, okay? Leaving me with 21 times cosine 38 degrees equals x. Okay, so then from here, what we're going to have to do is we are going to have to grab our calculator. So either grab a calculator if you have one. Now, if you don't have one, you can use one on your phone. You can download one. I'm sure there's apps on your phone. All you need is a scientific calculator, nothing fancy, right? So the other place that's a really good place to find one is on your computer. So I'm going to go to mine on the computer here, so that you can see what I'm typing in. On Google, I just searched calculator, and this is what came up. Now, it's really important if you're going to use this one that it is on degrees. So I can see here radians, degrees. Radians is something that we are not using. We are using degrees. So please make sure that degrees is the one that you have selected. So I believe it's a little bit lighter there. So keep that in mind. I also have this one here that I'm going to sort of check in the background what my answer is. And this one is definitely in, I don't know if you guys can see that. It's in the degrees mode, right? So that's something you want to check for. Okay, so let me get out of here. Okay, so you're going to go ahead in your calculator or on here, you're going to do, what was it, 21 times cosine of 38 degrees. Okay, you should get 16.5. I did that on my calculator. You can also do that here. Cosine of 38 equals, and then times it by 21. Oops. And I get, I think it's in the, see, it was in radians. Let's try that again. Make sure it's in degrees. That means that, I think it means that degrees needs to be the one that's darkened. Like this is degrees, you can see it's darker, and radians is sort of like shaded in the background. We don't want shade. So, all right, so we got, let's try it again. Cosine of 38 degrees equals, and then we're going to times that by 21, and you get 16.548. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead on here and I'm going to write 16.548, and that is my value of x. Now remember, this is a leg length that you're finding. They gave you the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse should always be the longest length. So if you get a value for x that is bigger, on this problem at least, if you get a value for x that's bigger than your hypotenuse, you've done something wrong, right? So something to keep in mind. All right, so now is your turn. This one over here, number 2, this is going to be a you try. So a you try means you are going to do it. Now, when you do it, before you continue on with the video, pause the video. So hit pause, and then we are going to, you're going to do it, and then you can come back, press play, and then I will go through the problem and make sure you got the right answer. So set it up, solve for x, and I'll see you back here in a minute or two. All right, so you have tried the problem. Let's see if you are right. So trying the problem here, you should have set this up as tangent because they did not give you a hypotenuse, right? So tangent's the only option here. So then you're going with opposite, that would be this, over adjacent, that would be this, in relation to our angle of 23. Okay, so the opposite side, 25, over adjacent side, x. Now, you got to solve for x. You cannot solve for x when x is in the denominator. So the first thing you want to do is get x into the numerator. So I'm going to multiply both sides by x to get it out of the denominator and into the numerator. And you have to do that by moving it to the other side. That's the only way to do it. So now imagine over here on the left-hand side, it is x over 1. I'm not going to write that, but that's what we have. So now I have x times tangent 23 degrees equal to 25. Okay, remember tangent 23 represents one whole value. So if you're going to move it to the other side or add it to something, or I don't know, multiply it to something, it needs to stay together. Okay, tangent is not a number. Tangent is a function. Tangent of 23 is a number value. So I'm going to go ahead and continue solving this to get x by itself. To do that, I'm going to divide both sides by tangent 23 degrees, like this. There it is. Anything over itself is 1, right? So then we have x equals 25 over tangent 23 degrees. This is where your calculator is going to come into play. Let me move myself over here. All right. So here, okay, what we're going to be doing is now putting this into the calculator. So grab your calculator or go ahead and I'm going to switch screens here and I'm going to do it here. So let's see, clear this away. All right, so we have 25, making sure it's in degrees, which it is, divided by tangent 23. Close that, right? And then that should give you, I believe it's 58.9. Yeah, I mean, you could do 58.896, right? 58.896. 58.896. So the x equals 58.896. And that is your value for x. Right? So there is the types of problems that you would do whenever x is a leg or possibly a hypotenuse. So one of the sides. Okay? Let's switch gears